Thank you, everyone, for joining our podcast today. The topic for today's discussion is prioritizing your AP initiatives. And our expert panelist today is Chris Doxey, President at Doxey, Inc. Chris spent most of her career implementing leading financial processes and internal controls at global companies such as Digital Equipment Corporation, Compaq Computer Corporation, Hewlett-Packard, and MCI, where she was a controller, director of financial process transformation, internal auditor, and director of global accounts. Welcome, Chris, and thanks a lot for doing this. Let's kickstart this podcast with our first question.
Okay.
What factors are the top factors driving AP automation?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a lot of companies ask that. And it really starts with looking at reducing the cost, of course, to process an invoice. And obviously, if an invoice is processed electronically or submitted electronically, that means that people aren't keying in information and you're not chasing paper. So cost is one of the top factors. The second one is, of course, cycle time. And cycle time is going to help certainly indicate how the AP automation effort has improved the AP process. And what that really means is AP departments are able to process invoices much quicker. And then I guess the third one would be an improvement in efficiency and controls. And what that really means is if we're processing invoices electronically, as mentioned in point number one, we're not keying in data, and there's the less risk that an invoice might be keyed in twice, or it might be submitted, or paid to the wrong supplier, and that kind of thing. So I would say that if we were to say the top initiatives, we would say cost, cycle time, efficiency, and which leads to an improvement in internal controls.
All right. Thanks, Chris. So let's move to the next question. Can you tell us about the pain points with the AP process and how automation can address these concerns?
Yes, the pain points in the accounts payable process are actually quite a few. It's traditionally been one of these corporate transaction processing areas or a back office area, and you kind of picture a lot of people in the AP department moving paper around, kind of running around trying to figure out where an invoice is and what the status is and the supplier's calling and that kind of thing. So when you think of kind of the older accounts payable department, you think of maybe a little bit of chaos, which leads to what the pain points are. And one of the pain points is I don't know where a manual invoice is, and I don't know who's approved it. I'm not sure where it is in the process. And, of course, automation helps indicate where an electronic invoice is and how it's being processed. The second pain point is suppliers are calling, they're unhappy, and we can't really get to them right away. We're not able to resolve a supplier issue in a timely manner. And what helps there is, of course, a supplier portal, actually being able to address the concerns what the supplier has without really getting into the need to call an AP department. So setting up suppliers is another one, a third one probably we could say, and that's the time it takes to get a supplier on board into the company. And we have a slide that we're showing that kind of bulletizes some of the pain points we've been talking about: tracking down purchases, searching for lost or misplaced invoices, and then one of the other key points is matching. A fourth point would be matching invoices with purchase orders and shipping documents. And that's the three-way match process. And, of course, getting that process automated helps streamline the whole process flow and actually helps with account reconciliations at the end of the month. And basically, you can see the list is quite numerous. But what we've found from an IOFM survey is that AP professionals spend about 84% of their time bogged down by a seemingly endless list of manual transaction processes. And that kind of goes full circle to how I introduced the answer to this question. You think of, again, the AP professionals running around chasing manual transactions and automating many of the items that we talked about with supplier portals, with e-invoicing, and, of course, e-payments really helps to streamline the key aspects of accounts payable.
All right, thanks, Chris. Let's move to our next question. Can you please tell us about some AP automation alternatives?
Yes, actually we have a couple of different components to automation. And if we start with invoice automation, and again, we introduced this when we were answering the last question, but with invoice automation, there are several alternatives. One is, of course, electronic invoicing, which is where suppliers are submitting their invoices totally electronic. That means not in PDF files, not in spreadsheets, and basically electronic invoicing means that someone is not keying in information. And if we couple concepts like PO flip, where a PO can actually be turned right into an invoice by the supplier, and couple in the GL interfaces where the accounting information goes right to the proper GL account. No one has to key in information or code the invoice to make sure it goes to the right cost center or business unit. Some companies are using OCR and data capture, and that's where they haven't fully moved to an automated process, and that actually helps to capture the data for an invoice, and sometimes they use a third party to actually submit the invoice in an electronic format, and it goes right to the GL system. Other companies have outsourced document conversion and document management similar to OCR and data capture. They're using a third party to help them with that process. Other aspects of invoice automation, and we mentioned, okay, where's my invoice? Who needs to approve it? Where is it in the workflow? And if we have the option to actually automate the signature process with workflow, and that can be done by tying the invoice approval process with the company's delegation of authority policy, and a series of tables can be used right from the employee master, and a series of emails and workflow is in place to actually accommodate that signature approval process, which goes an awful long way, with automatic escalation to the next level, and that, again, helps to prevent fraud and having accounts payable checking signatures and reducing any manual steps. The automated three-way matching process we mentioned earlier, and that's where we can actually set up a series of business rules and the automation solution to make sure that the invoice matches the PO and, of course, the receiving document. And then last but not least, in the area of invoice automation, we have exception management, and that's really getting our handle on where the exceptions are, where the process improvements are, and that can be done by certainly a series of implementing some concepts like this and solutions like this along with analytics. Next, we have payment automation, and payment automation, again, has a few aspects to it. Electronic payments is certainly the way to go, alleviate all manual checks, and that means putting processes in place so that we don't have those emergency payments in accounts payable. Using P-cards for both payment processes where you can get rebates back, and certainly using procurement cards in your company for those small dollar purchases. Supply chain financing and dynamic discounting are a little bit further down the curve with a little bit more sophisticated companies, but these are ways which we work closely with suppliers to take advantage of opportunities for financing and of certainly dynamic discounting. Automated payment controls, this is where you can actually check a payment before it goes out the door, using things like looking at positive pay, positive payee, even using ACH controls to make sure payments aren't going to the wrong person. Self-audits is where you audit your payments before they go out the door to make sure you're not paying any duplicate invoices or paying the wrong supplier. So self-audits can be put in place with automated tools again, using business rules for all of these solutions. And of course, with payment analytics, if we analyze how we're paying our suppliers and couple that with supplier master data, we can come up with some good metrics, and we can also come up with ways to determine if there are possibly at-risk suppliers within our database, and we can actually use those analytics to identify those potentially at-risk suppliers.
Thanks, Chris. What are some key questions to ask when implementing an AP automation solution?
Yeah, and this goes back to the pain points a little bit. And the checklist is, are we able to automate or to monitor and report how invoices have been received and which ones are waiting for payment? And, again, how do we know where an invoice is in the overall approval process and whose desk is it on? And we didn't talk about this one yet, but many opportunities are identified for supplier discounts, and many companies are missing those because they're not using any sort of automation. And if we can find a way to take advantage of supplier discounts, that's a win-win. That certainly helps, cost and cash, which is, of course, one of our key drivers for the automation process. Getting invoices approved and reviewed much quicker, and also knowing who to send the invoice for approval, and that can be done, as we talked about, from automated workflows with signature authorization built right in. And we also asked the question, shouldn't the processing of PO invoices be easier since the PO already provides the authorization? And what we're saying there is the company commitment for the spend to a certain supplier has already been pretty much approved by contract approval and PO approval. And again, streamlining the automated approval with workflow certainly can be built into that question, and certainly have ways of monitoring. And we talked quite a bit about supplier portals, and that's really the next point, and that's ensuring that suppliers have visibility to open invoices without calling the accounts payable department, and of course that's a drain on resources and increases cost. Reducing suppliers and the supplier master file is key because many companies have very large supplier master files, and they need to come up with ways to actually reduce those suppliers and maybe take a look at suppliers they're using, one time or so. P-card controls, we talked about P-card being a great payment mechanism, but certainly we need to have the controls in place to make sure that no fraudulent payments are being sent, and also that employees are not taking advantage of the opportunity to have a P-card. And then kind of the one that I hear quite a bit is there's so many solutions today, where do I focus first? So, and that's really identifying where your biggest opportunity is and also where your biggest pain point is.
Thanks, Chris. Can you please tell us how should metrics improve after an AP automation solution is implemented?
Good point. And what I say when I hear this question is make sure you have some sort of a metrics program in place today. And what we want to see is improvement and certainly improvement in trends. And this all goes back to why we would even think about doing an automated process, and that's really understanding what your average cost is to process an invoice today, the number of invoices processed per day per associate, and the percentage of invoices matched as a percentage of total invoices, which is that first-time match, going back to that automated three-way match discussion. And we talked about cycle time and certainly looking at average cycle time to process an invoice from receipt to payment, number of e-invoices as a percentage of total invoices, hopefully seeing that number increase as you're going through an automation initiative. You're getting more suppliers to submit e-invoices, number of suppliers accepting e-invoicing as a percentage of total suppliers, and then the dollar impact of discounts captured as a percentage of total discounts offered is a very good metric because that kind of goes back to one of the things we talked about, getting our discounts captured and taking advantage of early payment discounts. And dollar duplicate and erroneous payments as a percentage of total payments. And that's looking at if we have a self-audit tool, how can we actually decrease those erroneous and duplicate payments from being paid to suppliers. Next is a percentage change in invoice exceptions. And this is a good one because hopefully if we're tracking the invoices that aren't being paid in a timely manner, and any invoices that have disputes or exceptions, that percentage would be decreased. And then, of course, percentage change in payment types. With automating our payment process, we'd see a decrease in manual checks, an increase in ACH, P cards, and wires.
Thanks, Chris. So coming to the last question, what other guidance can you provide to ensure the success of an AP automation solution?
Yeah, the other guidance I would say is make sure that you have a good project plan in place and you identify all the individuals within accounts payable that are going to be impacted by the project. So you have, certainly a plan, number one, for the project. You have a team, and even before you start the initiative, you make sure you've got your business case developed and you have a good sponsor, then a plan again, and then a team, and you're in really good shape to make sure that you have everything you need to get going. And hopefully the information that we talked about today and showed on some of our slides will help you actually build a business case to get started on your AP automation initiative.
Thanks a lot, Chris. That was a very informative podcast. I hope our listeners enjoyed and learned a lot from this. Thanks again for doing this.
Okay, thank you.